Get out of the car!
Look, he pulling a gun. This for the...
Get that on radio!
Everyday carry is not just a set it and forget it kind of thing. You have to understand the weight and responsibility that comes with carrying a deadly weapon every single day. That includes knowing when not to use it as well as how to use it. Understanding the definition of deadly force, the justifications for it, and other options that you may have, and knowing how to train for it are going to make you absolutely formidable in the streets and in the courts. Defending yourself against foes both armed with a weapon and a bar card are going to be pivotal in you remaining an asset in your families and in your communities. So today we're going to be talking about deadly force, its definition, justifications for it, some other options you may have along the use of force continuum, as well as how to train for it so that you can be prepared for when you may have to use it. Hopefully not. Before we get into that, I do want to make a legal disclaimer that I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, and anything I tell you in this video cannot be used to help defend yourself in a court of law. Now that we have that out of the way, I want to cover why this is so important. Knowing and understanding the definition of deadly force, especially when it comes to the use of a firearm, a knife, a weapon, or even your fists, is going to be absolutely paramount when it comes to defending yourself, both in reality and against legal action. Being able to articulate your thoughts into words that are clear for everyone who was not there, so that you can describe why you did what you did, why you drew your firearm, and why you fired 6 rounds in under 2 seconds to a perpetrator. Articulating that to somebody who maybe doesn't understand a whole lot about firearms or doesn't know what actually happened because there's no evidence or the evidence is pretty scanty, that is going to be extremely important for building your defense case, especially if it was a good shoot. If it was a bad shoot or an illegal self-defense situation, then can't really help you there, and knowing this definition might not really get you very far. So let's kick it off with the definition of deadly force. Deadly force is force that a person uses that may cause death or serious bodily harm, or that a person knows or should know would create a substantial risk of causing death or serious bodily harm. Now, what is serious bodily harm, you may ask? Any harm to the body which causes severe, permanent, or protracted loss of an impairment to the health or function of any part of the body. So force that is causing or potentially could cause death or any of those things listed under the serious bodily harm definition could be classified as deadly force. Again, knowing that, memorizing it, being able to articulate it in your own words, and describing why you used it, especially after a legal self-defense shoot, is going to be key in building your case. And it's just going to make you a more educated and well-trained shooter when you're going through scenarios that may require a shoot or a no shoot. The next thing I want to cover are some justifications for deadly force. A key point to make here are that it does vary state by state, so it's extremely important for you to look up your own state laws on what exactly the justifications for deadly force are, what they aren't, and some other use of force options you may have along that spectrum. So I have here printed out my own home state's justifications for deadly force, and I'm going to read from them so as not to obscure any legal language and mess this up. So what I have here in my home state: a person is justified in using deadly force upon another person when he reasonably believes that such other person, is about to use unlawful deadly force against the actor, or a third person is likely to use any unlawful force against a person present while committing or attempting to commit a burglary.
Well, you are the burglar. Go down and burgle something. Very well.
Is committing or about to commit kidnapping or a forcible sex offense, or is likely to use any unlawful force in the commission of a felony against the actor within such actor's dwelling or its property. Curtilage, the word they use, but it means property. So, knowing that list of justifications for why you can use deadly force, again, is going to be paramount because it'll help you not only identify situations of, that oh crap moment, I may have to draw my firearm here, or I may have to use my knife or use my fists, or what have you. Identifying the situation is going to help you induce that training response and retract back to your mean level of training on how to handle those situations. That's why it's really important to go to the range as much as you can induce a lot of stress while you're there so that you're training under stress, and when you act under stress, you'll revert back to that training. So not only is it important to identify, it's also important to be able to list those situations, because when you are tried in a court of law, and you may be arrested and you may be tried in a court of law for crimes, even though it was a lawful shoot, now you have this list of, nope, this situation fell under this list of justified uses of deadly force. And that's really going to help build your case and hopefully keep you out of prison. Additionally, and maybe equally as important, there may be a list for your home state where situations do not justify deadly force. So I have also printed that out, and I'm going to read those to you as well so I don't mess it up. Once again, in my home state, the law states, a person is not justified in using deadly force on another to defend himself or a third person from deadly force by the other if he knows that he and the third person can, with complete safety, retreat from the encounter, except that he is not required to retreat if he is within his dwelling or its curtilage and was not the initial aggressor, or surrender property to a person asserting a claim of rights thereto, or comply with a demand that he abstain from performing an act which he is not obliged to perform, nor is the use of deadly force justifiable when, with the purpose of causing death or serious bodily harm, the actor has provoked the use of force against himself in the same encounter. And the last one's about law enforcement officers. I'm not a law enforcement officer, so it does not apply to me. Again, it is equally as important to know those situations so that you can think about them, rehearse them, train for them, and know when a no-shoot is a no-shoot. And some of those may be hard to simulate or induce at a range, but you can train no-shoots by maybe putting up a target that has his hands up rather than a firearm, or some other way of surprising yourself to draw your weapon, realize, oh, that's not a threat, I need to de-escalate and maybe think about some other uses of force. Or training not to draw your weapon at all, identify the threat first and then draw your weapon and act. The list goes on, but you get my point here. So understanding the list of justifications for deadly force and justifications where deadly force is not authorized is going to be pivotal in your defense, both in the streets and in the courts.
Have fun living on the streets.
So during my tenure in the military, I was tasked with learning, understanding, knowing, and teaching other people the use of force continuum as well as deadly force. And while it may not apply to civilians, it does give a little bit insight on what maybe police officers or military personnel are subject to in terms of when they can escalate to deadly force and what other options they have available to them. Some of them do apply to being a civilian, so I think it's important to go through it. And I'm just going to list out the ones that I know I was subject to and had to learn. First is presence, and that is simply just being there with your gun holstered or with your rifle, wearing your full kit. That may act as a deterrent against any terrorists or dangerous actors against you. So just physically being there is a deterrent. And this one doesn't really apply to being a civilian unless you open carry. You could consider that to be presence. But for most of us who are concealed carrying, because we don't want the public to know we have a firearm, this one doesn't really apply. So the next one would be verbal commands, and that's telling somebody to stop. Hey, don't do that, stop right there, put your hands up. Anything you can think of verbally commanding somebody, giving them the chance to stop doing what they're doing before you actually have to use force on them. The next one is soft controls, such as detaining somebody, and again, that doesn't really mean that you're arresting them or applying cuffs. Detaining somebody is just you're holding them for questioning or for interrogation. So that could be a soft control. It could also mean that you may have to put your hands on them, but you haven't quite struck them or assaulted them yet. And then the next level up would be hard controls, such as martial arts, mock holds, actually striking the person in order to get them to stop what they're doing. And then right under deadly force is less lethal force. So that could be pepper spray, batons, police officers use those bean bags nowadays. So all of those are options so that you don't have to use deadly force. And that doesn't mean that you have to walk up that ladder before using deadly force. Sometimes deadly force is authorized immediately if someone draws their gun on you unexpectedly. And then lastly, of course, is deadly force, which I've already defined. And it's also important to consider the fact that deadly force does not just include a firearm or a knife or a weapon. It could be your fists. It could be you strangling somebody. it doesn't have to be a situation where you're using an object as deadly force. It could be you just punching somebody in the head really hard, or let's say you get in a fight, you knock them out and their head collides with the curb and they die. That could be articulated as deadly force. So understanding that use of force spectrum and knowing where you fall on that spectrum and what options you have before escalating to deadly force could really keep you out of jail in some scenarios. And also knowing when to skip all that and go straight to deadly force. Both of those things are very, very important. So the last topic I want to cover on this is ways to train deadly force and get your mindset in the right position so that you can act appropriately in each scenario. Firstly, you have to induce some no-shoot scenarios, whether you're at an indoor range, an outdoor range, or whatever you have accessible to you. Use some targets where the hands are displayed or there's clearly no firearm, or you flip the USPSA target around and it's a no-shoot target right next to a shoot target or something along those lines. There are tons of drills out there where you can look this up on Google or YouTube and figure out what some good drills may be and what works best for your range scenario, because indoor ranges don't always permit the same things that outdoor ranges maybe do. Whatever it may be, come up with the training drill that best suits your range situation and train those no-shoots. If you do draw your weapon, you're on the wall and you have that decision-making time in order to not pull the trigger, know that you can do that when you need to. Similarly, you can use threat identification targets, such as the one I just mentioned, where one target has a firearm in his hand, the other target has his hands up, and some indoor ranges, especially the action targets, will rotate, and you can set a little drill on the iPad stuck on the wall there, and it can rotate different directions. So that could be helpful where you're just standing there and whenever the target rotates, you have to identify what's in his hands. All right, that's a threat, let me engage, or nothing in his hands, not a threat, hold fire. Next thing you could do with a buddy, and again, this is more something for an outdoor range or maybe your own private area, doesn't quite work with the indoor ranges because of the stall walls that are in between you and your buddy, but you could do some action-reaction drills where you both set up across from a target next to each other, shoulder to shoulder. One person is the action, the other person is reaction. The action guy will draw his weapon or come up from low ready or do something like pull out his phone really quickly. The reaction guy has to see that and decide based on what the action guy did and react appropriately. So if he draws his cell phone really quickly, that's obviously a no-shoot, a non-threat. So the reaction guy should not engage his target. If he draws his firearm, that guy can shoot, the action guy can shoot his target, and you should draw your firearm and shoot back. And hopefully, if you're fast enough, you'll beat him. So that's another drill you could do, is the action-reaction drill. There may be a video coming on that soon because I think it's really useful. Another great option for training your mind to target identify is some force-on-force training, such as simulations, paintball, airsoft, things like that, where you have to target identify before engaging. Whether they're a friend, a foe, or dead or alive, it just allows your brain to take a second before pulling the trigger. Lastly, while it's a little harder to come by, is projector-based scenario training. So in the military, we had what's called FATS, which is the Firearms Training Simulator. That system was a pretty cool system where it projects a video onto your target wall, and we would use air-powered laser guns to engage the target. And then we could play it back and see if we actually hit what we were aiming at. Nowadays, they have live-fire versions of that, which is pretty cool, but I realize that may not be accessible to everyone. I just wanted to mention that it is an option out there. Probably the most important takeaway of training these deadly force scenarios is coming away with knowing your capabilities. Whether it's being able to do a bill drill in under 2 seconds or knowing how many rounds you can hit from 25 yards or further back, that information and experience is going to be pivotal when it comes to defending yourself on the streets or in the courts. When a prosecutor asks, hey, why did you dump 6 rounds into the perpetrator in under 2 seconds instead of just shooting him one time, you can articulate with either video evidence or proof that you train showing that that happens very quickly, and it may even be faster with a boost of an adrenaline dump. Most importantly, train, train, train. You have to train so much that you know your capabilities and limitations without a doubt. Also, as I mentioned, you have to train no-shoot scenarios. When you walk around with a hammer, not everything is a nail. So being able to discern whether a target is a threat or not and engage or not is going to be equally as important as being able to shoot well and effectively. Additionally, look up your local police office instructions on what their definition of deadly force is, what they consider to be justifications for the use of deadly force or not using deadly force, and memorize those things so that you can equip yourself with information. And if the worst happens, that you can actually defend yourself and articulate your thoughts into words in a court of law. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments what you do to train for deadly force scenarios, whether it be mindset or drills you run at the range, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.